Welcome to Virtual Sunday, a presentation of Whatsoever You Do Incorporated. I'm Norbertine Father Tim Shilcox, offering reflections on the scriptures for the 29th Sunday in Ordinary Time, Cycle C. It's one of those beautiful Sundays where all three of the scriptures in some ways point in the same direction. Perseverance, persistence, don't give up. But they all have each their own wrinkle on it, so I'd like to sort of walk through each of the three of them with you. First one is a story of Moses and the battle between Israel and their enemies from the book of Exodus, chapter 17. He holds his hands up toward God in prayer, and the battle goes well. But he gets tired, and so he begins to droop his hands, and they fall to his lap, and the battle goes poorly for Israel. And so he realizes it's sort of a magic trick with God, like up we're winning, down we're losing. Up we're winning, down we're losing. Up we're winning, down we're losing. And so they get two of his assistants, and they hold up his hands, and they sit him on a rock, and they don't let his hands fall to his lap, and Israel mows down their enemies. And it's this kind of magic thing in a way. Certainly it's gracious, and it's God taking care of Israel, who have a special call in the history of salvation. But that the hands up, the hands down, the hands up, the hands down, I think there's a bit of a danger in it, if I could offer that for you. Who's in control there? Is it God? Or is it Moses with the hands up, the hands down? We can sometimes do that in our persistent prayer. No offense, but the idea many times of novenas. So we put God on a 9-day cycle, or the old Gregorian Masses on a 30-day cycle, or All Souls Day when I was a kid, and you'd make a visit to church, and for each visit, one soul would be released from purgatory. Who's in control there? Aren't we in control by those kind of schemes, by those kind of practices? When in fact, of course, we know how much we're not in control. The point of the reading isn't so much a gymnastic trick with Moses and his arms and his hands. It's that whether our hands are raised up in prayer, or pleading, or grabbing, or grasping, or letting go, or nailed to the cross, that we're reaching up to God, that we know we're not in control, and that we know that we cannot do this. We cannot win the battle by ourselves. That's the first point about persistence, that we get over the illusion that we're in control of things, and that we let God be in control. On the timing and on the response, our place is to rely on God, period. Second point I'd make in reference to the passage from 2 Timothy chapter 3. I read an article years ago, a line that just jumped right out at me, accused me in some ways, has stuck with me ever since, and try to unpack it and understand it better. It was an author on the spiritual life, our relationship with God. Just one bullet of a sentence just struck me to the heart. Self-pity destroys spiritual vision. Self-pity destroys spiritual vision. I didn't know exactly what it meant at the time. I don't know if I do now. But I knew it was something that seemed to be true. And wrestling with it in my own life, trying to walk with people who may be stuck in that place in these intervening years, even continuing a popular devotion, Jesus Calling. Maybe you read it. Sarah Young, it seems that her recent days have been cautioning in our relationship with God against this very dangerous place of self-pity. Poor me. Nobody works as hard as I do. Life isn't fair. I got bushwhacked. This shouldn't happen to me. And then a whole tyranny of shoulds that flow from that. And it doesn't do any good. It can set off our anger. It can set off our frustration. Perhaps even worse, our depression, our desperation, our despair. The truth is that we are called to life. That life is hard, not at the same level, at the same intensity, in the same way for everybody at every time, but everybody has a share of the cross's weight. And when it falls to us, we have to shake off not so much the weight of the cross, but the self-pity that goes with it. The expectation that life has to be fair. Life isn't fair. It wasn't fair for Jesus. Why should we expect an easier shake? And so in the midst of that temptation to self-pity, in that temptation to resentment or bitterness or anger or despair, to keep reaching out to God. I don't know what this is all about, God. I don't know why this is happening to me. Help me understand. Is it something I did that walked into it, a natural consequence of my actions? Is it just dumb luck? Is it somebody else's actions impacting on me? Help me to understand what it is, and help me to understand that you're right here. Paul speaking to Timothy, who's probably a little bit frustrated as he wades more deeply into his pastoral ministry in Ephesus. The results aren't coming as quickly as he'd like, or it's more difficult, or there's a misunderstanding, or two or three, or a gazillion, or he's exhausted, or he hasn't had a day off in however long. New jobs are like that. They're hard to start. And the first result, I remember a 2-month married husband. I did the wedding for the two of them, ran into the husband, we grabbed a bite to eat. How's it going? And over the table, he started to cry, and he said, Tim, this is harder than I thought it would be. You bet it is. Whatever we choose, whatever our dream, it's harder than we thought it would be. And it's not always the best parts of the dream, but it's a package deal. And so to refuse to yield to self-pity, none of this poor me stuff, none of this railing at God, why me stuff. Don't expect answers to those questions. But God, you're with me. And that brings me to the gospel passage today from Luke chapter 18. The evil judge and the persistent widow. She keeps railing, she keeps railing, she keeps railing. She wants justice. It's the judge who's lazy, who's tired, who, get lost, you bother me. But she is persistent, and she gets what she needs. Rolling Stones here, not what you want, but what we need. What we need. God knows that. Our persistence in prayer lifelong, our realizing, as Dr. Paul Waddell from the college said once in a class I was sitting in on, fundamental truth, I believe God loves me and wills for my good. And if we believe that, then in just or unjust circumstances, when we're successful or struggling or confused or failure, ready to throw in the towel, or when it's taking longer than we would like, or the battle's not going our way, if we believe God loves us and wills our good, then somehow, some way, according to some time that God only knows and we don't have to, things will work out. We'll be okay. Because the victory has been already won in the life and death and resurrection of Jesus. We know how the story ends for him and for his friends and disciples, how it will end for us. The in-between part, unpredictable. And so 3 forms of persistence today, brothers and sisters. No magic act, no putting God on a timeline. No numbers, no schedule, no calendar. But just keep raising our hands up amidst whatever battles we're fighting. One day at a time, like the 12-steppers say. 1 hour at a time, as one stepper told me once, 12-stepper told me once. Refuse to give in to self-pity when it's not going so well and it's not our fault, or we don't know why it's going poorly. We refuse to let self-pity destroy our spiritual vision, which is a vision of that great truth, that God loves us and wills our good. Maybe you're riding high. Maybe you're tempted to throw in the towel. Most likely, you're somewhere in between. Good days, bad days, some successes, sometimes the balls drop, some disappointments and failures. Wherever we are, we reach to God, and we know that God reaches back to us and holds us tightly in the powerful love of Jesus Christ, which already has conquered death and which always keeps us safe.